Today was day 6 of Brian Walsh's murder trial, and the jury saw a lot of evidence. We started off with Dr. Richard Atkinson from the Chief Medical Examiner's office. He is a medical examiner, forensic pathologist. He does autopsies. Obviously, he did not do one in this case because there was no body to autopsy, because Brian disposed of Anna's remains in various dumpsters across Massachusetts. Brian already pled guilty to misleading police and also improperly conveying his wife's remains without any permission or authority. But he continues to fight accusations in court that he's responsible for the premeditated killing of his own wife. Dr. Atkinson's testimony began on Friday, but he was barely able to really get into anything after going over his own credentials. But he did talk about some bloody pieces of carpet that were recovered from the trash at Brian's mother's apartment complex dumpster. Because of the rules here, I'm very limited as to what I can show you, but there are 8 pieces of carpet like this one, and they have various amounts of bloody stains all over them, and some of them are quite gruesome. And this carpet is extremely important because it comes from the living room of the Walsh's house, and this just doesn't match Brian's story. Brian claims that after his and Anna's friend Jem left around 1:30 in the morning on New Year's Day, that the two of them continued upstairs to celebrate some more. I don't know if that's supposed to be a euphemism for getting it on. But anyway, Brian claims that after a time he went downstairs. He says he comes downstairs to clean the kitchen for an hour. Remember, this is New Year's Day around probably 2:30 in the morning at this point. And an hour later, he goes back up to bed. He says he senses something wrong and that he nudged Anna, realized that she was deceased, kept nudging her and nudging her. He got into a panic and then he nudged her off the bed. His lawyer says that Brian didn't think anybody would believe him that Anna just simply up and died in the middle of the night. Importantly, during all of this alleged finding his deceased wife and immediately coming to the assumption that he would be blamed for it, Brian and Anna's children are in the house asleep. So if Anna passes away in the bedroom, like he alleges, from a sudden unexplained death, and most likely brings her to this area of the basement, which has some of his suspicious purchases, and tested positive for blood in several areas in here. If we believe Brian, and she died in the bedroom, and then he brought her down here to... so gross, I'm not even gonna say it. He used tools like this one on his wife's body. Then why is the living room carpet bloodied? I went scrolling through Anna's Instagram. I'm gonna show you a picture. Here's Anna playing with her children on the exact same carpet. There's the carpet again. Very clearly the same carpet. If he was trying to keep it a secret from the kids, she died in the bedroom and then was dismembered in the basement. Why is the living room carpet so bloody? On cross-examination, Brian's counsel asks Dr. Atkinson all kinds of different ways that you can die suddenly. Again, Brian's claim is that he went upstairs and out of nowhere Anna was deceased. They ask him to explain an upper airway food obstruction, or perhaps dying by fear or fright. They ask him about sudden death by autoerotic asphyxiation, and he's made to describe several neurological conditions, cardiac conditions, embolism, aortic dissection, cardiac tamponade. He's asked if air travel can impact things and also whether physical activities such as sexual relations could. And it's a little bit ridiculous because many of the causes of death that Brian's lawyer is describing are causes that can be identified on an autopsy. And there was no autopsy because there was no body, because Brian Walsh admitted that he threw away the body. We also heard from Teresa Marchese, who worked with Anna at Tishman Speyer. She's the managing director of human capital management, which is like, I think it's like advanced HR, like she's like the top of the HR. In the corporate world, I do believe that at some point the titles for people are just completely made up. But I mean no disrespect, I really liked her as a witness. She talked a little bit about Anna's compensation, that she made $220,000 a year when she started. That was her base pay. And she also had life insurance through them, through MetLife, that was double her base salary. And Brian and the children were all beneficiaries on that policy. At some point on January 4th, Brian calls one of the buildings that Anna works at most often, the Crossing in DC. He's like, my wife is missing, can you guys help me? And Trisha Marchese gets wind of this and she ends up talking to Brian on the phone. She said that Brian told her that the last time Anna went missing for more than 24 hours, Anna was annoyed that Brian went looking for her too soon. Or at least that's part of Brian's claim as to why he didn't start looking for her sooner. We know now the reason he didn't start looking for her is because he was the one hiding her. Anyway, so Teresa and the head of global security at Tishman Speyer, this guy Hugh Dunleavy, they both conference call Brian. And on this conference call, Teresa tells Brian that he's in good hands because Hugh is former Secret Service. At that point, Brian becomes distraught, like audibly upset, he's crying. And Hugh has to be like, get a hold of yourself, man. Teresa ends up offering to go over to Anna's house in DC, and Hugh goes over with her. They met local DC police over at the property, and they also brought 2 engineers from Tishman Speyer with them. This is so interesting because they brought the engineers in case they needed to break into Anna's house. This is her personal home. Tishman Speyer has nothing to do with this property, but her work cared enough about her to bring people along to physically break into her house in case she needed help. That is the level of care that was appropriate for the situation, and Brian, With the police present and with Brian's consent, the Tishman Speyer engineers do break into Anna's house, which appears totally normal. Obviously, because they were sent on this wild goose chase by Brian in the first place. When Hugh had first talked on the phone to Brian, he was like, you need to call the Cohasset police immediately. He said, you haven't heard from Anna in like 4 days. You need to call the local police and let them know that she's missing. And she was last seen in your area. And Brian says, I will. And Hugh's like, you know what? I'm just going to call the Cohasset police anyway. And it's a good thing he did, because Brian did not call the Cohasset police. It was only because of his call that there was ever a well-being check on Anna in the first place. When Brian's lawyer, whose name is Larry Tipton, if I haven't mentioned that, when Tipton crosses Teresa, he asks about the Thanksgiving trip that Anna took to Ireland. She had flown with her affair partner to Ireland over the Thanksgiving holiday. And at first I thought this was going to be about her using her sick days, but now I think it's about a pulmonary embolism. And he's going to try to allege that the trip to Ireland somehow started a pulmonary embolism, which is a blood clot. I am not a doctor, and I literally didn't even look this up. I think it comes from your leg and goes to your lung, and it can for sure kill you. I don't know if it makes any sense for it to happen here. If you're a medical professional, you can let me know. So that would have been an international flight roughly 6 weeks before she died, for context. And long-haul flights can contribute to things like pulmonary embolisms. Tipton also asks Teresa about this Legionnaires outbreak that occurred at one of the buildings that Anna works in. In October of 2022, there was a Legionnaires outbreak, and they alerted everybody in December of 2022. I did look up Legionnaires. Again, I'm not a doctor. It doesn't look like the kind of thing that kills you with 0 symptoms, though. I don't know. Then we get into a ton of different security footage of what Brian was doing on the 1st of January, the day that Anna died. At 3:40 p.m. on the 1st, Brian purchases Band-Aids and antibacterial ointment from Walgreens. This is important because we've seen a cut on Brian's hand that may or may not have occurred at the time that he was actively dismembering his wife. We haven't really narrowed down when exactly Brian began doing that to Anna. And I think even if you can believe that an innocent man would do that to his own wife, it's harder to believe that he would do it so quickly. To me, this says that by about 3 o'clock in the afternoon on New Year's Day, that Brian was already in the process of handling Anna's body. I also heard from staff at Vin and Liquors who says that Brian goes there on the weekends to hang out. He was like, yeah, Brian comes to buy his stuff, but then he just kind of stays there because he doesn't really seem to have anything else to do, even though Brian has his own children are at home. And on New Year's Day, January 1st, Brian showed up even though the liquor store was closed. This is at 5:12 p.m. and you can see he's exited his car carrying a trash bag of something. He dumps it in the dumpster and then returns to his vehicle. We also saw Brian at Lowe's. He actually went there on 2 different trips, and one of the trips, Brian brought his child with him. Brian is purchasing supplies to cover up the death of his wife, and his son is right here playing with the little scanner device. There was also testimony from somebody with Massachusetts State Police Crime Scene Services, which if you've never heard of them before, it's probably because you watched the Karen Reed trial and they were just never called. Anyway, they were called for this case and they found some interesting stuff. They processed the kitchen, and in this cabinet above the refrigerator, in this corner right here, there's a knife. This is it up close. It's on top of some ant bait, and the blade of the knife did test positive for blood. Importantly, this witness is not the witness that does the actual DNA testing. He was the last one on the stand today, so I assume that they're going to call the DNA testing witness tomorrow. What he was doing was testing various items and areas to see if there was any blood at all, but not testing whose blood it was. He processed Brian and Anna's bedroom, and there was no blood evidence anywhere in this room that he found. They even at one point took up the flooring, and there was still nothing underneath the floorboard. But just to be clear, the only person who is alleging that Anna passed away in the bedroom is Brian. So it's not surprising to me that there wasn't blood evidence in this room. When he tested spots on this basement floor, as well as the stairs, there were several small, like you see these white pieces of tape, there were little areas of blood spots. I'm not talking about this big reddish stain over here. That is totally unrelated. I'm talking about little dots up in this area. And here are some of the supplies that Brian had purchased on the 1st. This is a comprehensive list of, I think, everything from the receipts they showed us today that he purchased on the 1st. When Brian's counsel crosses Matthew Sheehan, that's this guy's name, by the way, he's like, well, there wasn't any blood in the bedroom. He just really locks in on that. It also focuses on the fact that there was no blood found in any of the sinks or bathtub, shower drains, or on the handles for the sinks and showers. Tipton is like, wouldn't you expect to see blood there if somebody had been like washing blood off their hands? And I'm confused because I thought we were all on the same page about Brian admitting to disposing of his wife in multiple dumpsters. I literally rewatched his plea. That's what they alleged. And they were like, are you admitting to everything that's alleged? And he was like, yes. So how the lawyer is allowed to even come close to making this argument, it feels like bad faith to me. I don't know. I'm not a lawyer. Half of the time we're learning as we go. That's everything I know about this for now. Love you guys. Drink water. Bye.